It is easy to fall victim to the misconception that new equals better. This notion is often not true, and the most effective change is brought about by building upon the past, not by destroying it. During the modern movement, new thinking regarding architecture and urban planning sparked architects around the world to redevelop their cities through the lens of modernist planners. For example, Jane Jacobs spoke about her discontent with the top-down, impetuous practices of modern planners such as Robert Moses. Moses was an incredibly influential architect in New York City in the 20th century, but was strongly in favor of the tabula rasa, or clean slate approach. Collectively, as a group, we believe that Jacobs is right, that urbanism should be built upon the past instead of demolishing it. We feel this because the roots of the history are in its history, and it is unfair to the people already living in the city. Moses was explicit in his beliefs that the past should be destroyed when rebuilding a city. Moses, being a modern architect, believed that in order to become influential in the built environment in an urban setting, one must partake in creative destruction, which is an economical concept that revolutionizes an economy structure from within. This philosophy, however, constantly destroys the old development to incessantly create a new one, such as the deconstruction of older neighborhoods for newer developments. He was the chairman of the city's Slum Clearing Commission, which was prepared to swallow up the entire northeast corner of Brooklyn Heights through the Cadman Plaza project. Moses envisioned strictly planned communities and did not want any remains of the old city left behind. Certain parts of Brooklyn, such as Willowtown, faced demolition. A drastic change like this not only completely transforms the city, but it also causes many people to be forced out of their homes. Actions like this show that Moses was in favor of gentrification, which raises a whole new array of issues, including discrimination based on race, social class, and more. A relevant example of gentrification today is Harlem, an area that used to be rich with African American culture. Many poor African Americans are being forced to leave their houses for new construction geared towards middle-class residents. What is happening in Harlem is essentially what Moses wanted to happen all around the city. This is clearly unfair to the people of Harlem and changes the identity of Harlem. There are ways to improve an area that do not involve discriminating against current residents and do not entirely destroy all its history. Furthermore, the economic impact of older historic buildings is quite significant, as Jane Jacobs, who saw more continuity with cities past, points out chain stores, chain restaurants, and Hanks go into new construction, but neighborhood bars, foreign restaurants, and pawn shops go into older buildings. So, disregarding and tearing down these old buildings will negatively impact the economy. The older, more historic buildings add character to the businesses that patrons value. Not only do the historic buildings add character that patrons value, but the historic buildings add unique character and charm to a city. A lot of cities are identified by their iconic buildings, which are usually the more historic buildings too. Contemporary architects like James McGillivray and Vivian Lee from North American-based firms Lamas are innovative thinkers researching ways to protect yet modernize historical sites. For example, they are working to superimpose facades from historical sites on one another. This superimposition would modernize and revitalize historical areas while bringing in new modern ideas in architecture. Projects like this one demonstrate modern thinking that is continuous with the past, which Jacobs was in favor of. She argued this idea and criticized the failures of modern city planners in her book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. Overall, the efforts of urbanization and city planning is a complex topic that should be examined, researched, and debated among scholars. Over time, The views on urbanism have changed as well as how we as a society thinks about historical buildings and architecture. Consequently, as a group, we believe that Jacobs is right that urbanism should build upon the past instead of demolishing it. We feel this because the roots of the city are in its history, and it is unfair to the people already living in the city. In general, the statement of Jacobs is more convinced and thinks more about the community, which has its own culture and history. Probably the ongoing discussion of urbanization will never have a precise conclusion, but we will provide the best way to deal with it contemporarily.